in before we get a bunch of replies in the comment section of this video saying snarky things like, "Oh yeah, of course it's getting worse, Lego. You're only just realizing that now." Comment. I understand that this isn't necessarily the most surprising or out of nowhere thing to be stating about the Montreal Canadiens, but heading into today's game for the Habs against the San Jose Sharks, which is going to be Pacific time, by the way, 7:30 p.m. PST, because they're in San Jose. I wanted to go over some of the extra news and notes from the last Montreal Canadiens game, where the Habs lost in a comeback fashion against the Anaheim Ducks in a way that you could say was kind of within their control. Kind of? Okay, maybe it was really within their control. And a lot of the backlash and fallout from this game in particular has been centered around guys on that second line. You know, we've been seeing a lot of conversation about the guys who had gotten benched. We've been seeing other discourse saying things like, hey, the Montreal Canadiens are mostly just a team of passengers right now, outside of like 2 or 3 guys. There was a Reddit comment that I saw that said that same thought, that aside from Juraj Slafkovsky, Yoel Armia, and whichever goaltender was playing, everybody else on the team was kind of just taking their foot off the gas pedal. And at their best, Montreal hockey seems to be a one-line team at the moment, with the Caulfield-Slafkovsky-Suzuki line doing, supposedly, much of the brunt work. But it's been 5 games in a row. The Montreal Canadiens have lost. They have not been looking good in this stint. Sure, some of these games were in overtime, others were shutouts, but ultimately the Montreal Canadiens have fallen so far out of the playoff race that, at this point, the likelihood of another top prospect being available for the Canadiens in the 2025 draft, it does seem more likely. This show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Go out there and check the first link in the description to save some money, get some free months on your VPN, and support the channel all in the process. If we head over to the NHL standings and we take a look at the wildcard race, right now, the Montreal Canadiens are barely above 500. They have 53 points in 52 games played, and they are 6 points removed from Columbus and Detroit, the 2 teams that have the wildcards right now, who each have a .557 points percentage on the year. Montreal's at a .510. The Habs losing 3, 4, 5 in a row definitely makes this worse. They were in a much better spot just a few weeks ago, so obviously their standings aren't really too great. If you go over to the NHL in its entirety, the Montreal Canadiens are now down there at 22nd in the NHL, which is, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th worst in the league. If they were to finish in this spot, they would get maybe a top 11, maybe a top 12 pick at worst, and if they start to lose a little bit more, then they could squeak into that top 10 territory in the National Hockey League draft and maybe even get themselves a good shot at getting top 5. That is all assuming they continue down this stretch where they've been losing most of their games and they continue falling down the standings. If you go over to goal differentials, the Montreal Canadiens are a little bit worse over there. They are, 6th, 7th, 8th worst in the NHL with a -23. Kind of funny that my Vancouver Canucks are right there at a -16. They are 9th worst in the National Hockey League, but still, the Montreal Canadiens are the main topic here, and it's funny because every game is different. You have some games like the Minnesota game where the Habs just totally do not show up. Nobody shows up. You could give Marc-Andre Fleury the credit that he needs or deserves for getting a shutout at 40 years old at the Bell Center, but the Montreal Canadiens did not make his job any more difficult than it needed to be. You had the loss against Anaheim, which was a comeback loss. They had a 2-0 lead, and then they just let the game get away from them. This is where you really start to question how far a lot of these guys are equipped to take on a full NHL season. The Habs have a really good schedule this week. They have 2 off nights and they have 4 games played. But still, even with that in mind, I went out there and dropped Lane Hutson and Patrik Laine from all of my fantasy teams in a crime of passion because they've been so bad, they have literally been giving me negative points in fantasy the past few games here. And we're starting to see more discourse about guys like Lane Hutson saying, hey, the guy's looking a little bit tired. He's never played an 82-game season before in hockey. Sure, there were times with the NTTP and stuff, he played maybe 40, 50, 60 even games on a year in that capacity against junior guys, but the National Hockey League, is he ready to be a, let's say, 20-plus minute guy every single game for 82 games? Sure, we know that he'll eventually round out to getting an 82-game season and looking good enough to get maybe 70 or 75 points in a season. I think that's not unreasonable for Lane Hutson, but for right now, the guy's super young. This is his rookie season. Like, he's not gonna go out there and be a bona fide number one right away. He's being played like a number one in Montreal because he literally is the best player on the blue line, but still, is he good enough or conditioned enough to doing this for a full season? It's okay to say that he's not. He is literally a rookie. But then there are other guys that are also playing some of the worst hockey of their seasons at this point on the year. Patrik Laine, we've been talking about him the past few days. He got benched. Here's his response to how everything went down, courtesy of the folks over on RDS Sports. They tweeted this out, and it was quite noteworthy, I would say. Okay, it's in French. "It's difficult," Laine said. "Even if my body feels good sometimes and my confidence isn't quite there, I have to contribute in another way if my offensive game isn't clicking." And in terms of progress, you can say that there was some there. Mika Lind went out there and said this: "I watched the interview. Laine was much less hard on himself than he used to be. Just one game in a long season, those things happen, just gotta get back to it, just gotta be better overall. His shoulders weren't slumped, he didn't seem defeated at all. Good signs." And I will definitely applaud and commend Laine for being able to progress to that point where he does not look super defeated or super out of it during a media interview, especially with Montreal. We understand that these Canadian markets can be very difficult on the players who are struggling. But for Patrik Laine, he's going to need to be able to carry the heat, because if his play continues like this, where he's been looking lackadaisical and slow and lazy and he doesn't really do anything outside of scoring goals, and when he's not scoring goals, there's literally nothing else he contributes, this is where you start to realize why Columbus and why Winnipeg gave up on this guy, and why it was so sour every time they left him out and sent him away to a new team. There is so much talent here with Patrik Laine, but the consistency is ridiculously bad. And it's not even just Laine, it's the other top pick taken from one of these earlier drafts. It's Kirby Dach as well, who also got benched in that same game. Priyanka Emrith tweeted this out, the ice times for these guys, and it wasn't looking pretty. Laine had 10:33, Kirby Dach had 11:57 in the game against the Ducks. Only Michael Pezzetta played less than these two guys. So if that doesn't show you where things are with the Canadiens and their line deployment, I don't know what will. Anyways, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Heading into today's game against the San Jose Sharks, what are your thoughts on Laine, on Dach, how things have gotten worse for the Montreal Canadiens, how the team looks tired, how the team is really being carried by just a few guys every single game here, and what are your expectations for the next, let's just say, 2 weeks or so? Never mind today's game against one of the worst teams in the NHL in San Jose. What are your thoughts on how this team is just going to perform over the next little while? Let me know in the comments, what do you think? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.